blanket prosecution. The police commissioner is urging officers in England and Wales to end the blanket prosecution of all cannabis users. Durham Constabulary's police and crime commissioner say his force's resources are no longer being used to combat small-scale growth of the drug, despite the fact that it is still classified as a crime. Well, to discuss this, I'm joined by Tom Lloyd, who's a former police chief constable, and addiction therapist Sarh Graham. Very good afternoon to you both. Tom Lloyd, if I can start with you. Is this a good idea?
Oh, very much so. Ron Hoggs and I both served for over 30 years prosecuting the drug laws, and we both know that drug prohibition is a hugely costly, counterproductive and harmful failure. And not only that, the so-called war on drugs is actually a war on people, often the disadvantaged and the vulnerable. For example, medical cannabis patients who around the country are unfortunately being prosecuted. So not only is he understanding that we've got to do something different and call for a national debate, he's also very much aware that over recent years police resources have been cut substantially, and he wants to use the police officers in Durham, and I would hope elsewhere in the country, on doing things like reducing the incidence of robbery and burglary, rather than frankly wasting effort on drug law enforcement. And you may recall that Brian, now Lord Paddock, in Lambeth in London in 2001 had a 6-month experiment where he didn't prosecute cannabis. Now, cannabis use went up slightly in that area, I think from the sort of honeypot effect, and it wouldn't happen if you had that in the whole of London. But what also happened was that crimes like robbery and burglary went down, and the police arrests and clear-ups for those offences went up. So on a whole range of areas, Ron Hoggs is very much on the right track with this initiative.
Sarh Graham, what do you think? Prosecuting growers of small amounts of cannabis is a waste of police time, and something different needs to be done.
I think if we actually look at the facts around what's happening in this country, cannabis use is declining, and crucially, cannabis use is really declining amongst teenagers. In the UK at the moment, most of the cannabis sold on the streets is skunk cannabis, and it's sold in little baggies like this. This is about a £20 bag of cannabis that you would buy on the street, although I've actually got lavender in here. And what we really don't want at this point, that cannabis has got so much stronger, and we're really seeing links with lower IQ in cannabis users, especially teenagers. We're also really seeing an evidence base that is that's telling us about the link between skunk cannabis and psychosis. So we absolutely don't want to change the policy and do anything that's going to put more cannabis onto the streets. And when you grow cannabis, when you grow even just one plant, you actually produce hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of bags like this. And so some of that cannabis is going to end up on the street. And also, if we think about who's growing this cannabis, are these people going to be parents? In which so teenagers that are living with parents who are growing cannabis are in very real danger. If they're teenagers like I was, when I was 14 I started smoking cannabis, those teenagers will be snipping off the buds and taking them into the school playground. If I was a parent in Durham, I would be incredibly concerned about this policy, and I would be asking my local police force why they're going down this avenue. We know that legalisation is a disaster for young people. If you look at what's happening in Colorado, and if you look at what's happening in Los Angeles, I've spent a lot of time in Los Angeles, the use of cannabis there is dramatically higher than what we've got in the UK. And I think, Tom, you really are out of date in what you're thinking. Things have moved on. You're no longer a police officer. Of course, it's important that we target big dealers, but I spoke to a drug dealer this morning, a former drug dealer, and when I told him what Durham are up to, he laughed. He absolutely laughed, because Durham is going to become a county that people will move into. They will take advantage of this relaxing of the law. And if I was a parent or if I was a landlord, I would be very concerned.
Tom Lloyd, it's the wrong policy, and drug dealers are laughing at it right now.
Well, I mean, drug dealers have been laughing at law enforcement for the last 30 or 40 years, because prohibition of drugs basically hands them a hugely lucrative, in this country, a £6 billion market. Now, there are a number of issues that Sarh Graham raised, for example, about the relationship between cannabis and mental illness. The rate of schizophrenia in this country has actually stayed flat over the last 30, 40 years, whilst the use of cannabis has gone up dramatically. So if it was causing schizophrenia, then we'd see a massive increase. And so the facts are quite clear. I mean, the evidence also of places like Colorado and Portugal, where for 15 years cannabis and in fact all drugs have been decriminalised, shows that actually this is a much better way of dealing with it. At the moment, criminals run the market. They make a huge profit. They prefer to produce high THC, which is the psychoactive ingredient, a high THC cannabis because they can produce more plants in a year and therefore make more profit. Unless we start listening to people like Ron Hogg and, frankly, people like me with a huge amount of experience, built over 30 years and subsequently in travels all over the world, we must get away from this kind of tired idea that locking people up for either producing or using, and particularly using cannabis, and in fact all drugs, and I know that's a different argument, simply is an outdated and failed policy.
How would you respond to that, Sarh Graham?
I have to pick up on this issue around schizophrenia. I actually work with many young people and their families, and the reality is that most of these young people who've got cannabis psychosis or even schizophrenia-like symptoms are not making it into mental health services. Our mental health services in this country are not fit for purpose for young people. We haven't got a single residential rehab for teenagers in this country, so most of this problem is going undiagnosed. If we look at what's happening in the gangs in London and other urban cities, I would say there's a very strong link between skunk cannabis use and the gang violence that we have, the postcode wars, and also the paranoia, the emotional dysregulation, the link between skunk cannabis use and violent computer games. The fact is, this is a major, major problem. Parents contact people like me, addiction therapists, and they know the truth about what's happening in these young people's bedrooms. They see the devastation that's being caused by those young people who do smoke cannabis heavily. And we need to do everything we can to stop cannabis making it onto the streets, making it into young people's pockets, not be taking action which is actually very detrimental to young people's health. If we look at Portugal, as I said, Portugal has not been good for young people. Yes, it may have some good effect in terms of getting people into treatment, but you know, we need to put investment in treatment of other substances other than heroin and crack cocaine. Those are the two drugs that are defined as problem drugs in this country. They eat most of the resources. Cannabis users are quietly, poorly in their bedroom because they're not committing crime. People don't realise, just how many young people are affected by this substance. The parents do. If you speak to a charity like Drug Fam, they will tell you the reality of skunk cannabis use, and we absolutely don't want to see more plants being grown of this substance. It's neurotoxic and it's very dangerous.
Sarh Graham, Tom Lloyd, we're out of time, but thank you very much for debating that issue there. Thank you.